Ever considered Russia's vastness? It was more expansive in the past, not referring to the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics era, but the Russian Empire. By 1914, it encompassed over 22 billion square kilometers, making it the most populous European nation. This was not enough for Russia to be decisively defeated during the First World War, despite being on the winning side of the Allies. And did you already know this? Have you ever wondered why? Are you interested? Alright, then stay until the end of the video. To start, let's look a little more in detail about the dimensions of Russia, a country that at that time extended through Eastern Europe, the Caucasus, Siberia, Central Asia, and the Far East, over a vastness of 22.8 million square kilometers. In terms of population, Russia had 170 million inhabitants. This represented more than double the entire German population, the second most populous European country. In diplomatic terms, Russia was adhered to the Triple Entente, which was the military alliance together with France and the United Kingdom, to which most European countries joined during the war. So with all this, why on earth did they have to withdraw from the conflict in 1917 without being able to savor victory with the other allies? Now let's look at some of the historical context of early 20th century Russia. As you may know, it was then a monarchy led by the Romanov dynasty. The ruler, Nicholas II, already had the antipathy of the Russian people, which was evident after the disaster of the Russo-Japanese War of 1904. In it, Capo obtains a necessary victory that stops the Russian expansion in the Far East. And while the Tsar was spending the few funds from the country's coffers on war matters, the Russian people were plunged into tremendous poverty and misery, which triggered the Russian Revolution of 1905, in which the working class and the peasantry rose up against the Romans. As a result, there was a transition from an absolute monarchy to a constitutional monarchy. It's important that we take this background into consideration before we move on to World War I, specifically in the year 1917. It turns out that Russia was not doing well at all, and kept proceeding against the German and Austro-Hungarian advances on the Eastern Front. While they made some progress in the Caucasus, there was something internal that stopped them, a new revolution by the Russian people who were not satisfied with the changes of 1905. After all, the poverty and famine in the country had not been alleviated, and by that time almost 2 million Russians had lost their lives in combat. This is added to the increase in popularity of the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party, divided into the Bolshevik factions, the extremists, and the Mensheviks, the more moderates. There is thus a new revolution given in two phases, that of March and that of November. The Romanov monarchy is then overthrown and subsequently assassinated, while a civil war begins in Russia, mainly between the Bolsheviks and the White Movement, which would be the legitimate successor to the monarchy. Thus, once the Bolsheviks gain control of most of European Russia, they sign the surrender to the Central Powers through the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk in March 1918, definitively leaving the Great War after handing over vast amounts of territories. So far, we have seen the main cause of the Russian defeat, which in summary was the internal instability that led to a civil war, which forced the Russians to leave the war. However, it was not the only one, because for this point to have been reached, there was a deplorable performance on the battlefronts that triggered the revolution. So let's talk about the subject. Starting with the military wear and tear, Russia had been suffering serious military defeats, especially on the Eastern Front. The lack of resources and the exhaustion of the Russian population and army played a major role in their inability to sustain a prolonged war. And boy, 3 years were enough to demonstrate this shortcoming. To this is added the scarcity. As mentioned, the Russian economy had been bad since the beginning of the century and was not prepared for a large-scale war. The lack of supplies, including weapons, ammunition, and food, significantly weakened the army and contributed to popular discontent among the working and peasant classes, who were swayed by the socialist discourse that offered them control over the means of production. We also have to take into account the lack of military preparation. Despite having one of the largest armies in the world, Russia was not ready for modern warfare. Their weaponry and tactics were outdated, and they lacked the necessary infrastructure to move troops and supplies efficiently. This was actually already evident from Russia's poor performance in past wars, such as against Japan and the Crimean War. It is also important to take into consideration the tremendous multi-ethnicity of the vast Russian Empire that complements the main reason referring to internal instability and revolution. While the Bolsheviks and the White Movement were the main factions of the Civil War, there were countless separatist movements that rose in the midst of nationalist fervor to achieve their independence, of which very few succeeded. As you can see, the decisive defeat of the Russian Empire and its subsequent collapse during World War I was the result of a combination of factors, the main one being internal instability, but also influenced by military wear and tear, scarcity, and lack of command experience. Something that led to decisive historical events during the 20th century, such as the emergence of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, and that to this day continues to affect our present. What other reason do you think influenced the rapid defeat of the colossal Russian Empire?